Okay, so construct validity. Let's start with the idea of construct. And I apologize again, McKenna and Stahl make this unnecessarily confusing in an effort to make it less confusing. So the construct is the real thing in the world that we want to measure. It could be intelligence, it could be beauty, right? There could be a way you could operationalize that in some way, and certainly in our culture we do, right? It could be reading skill. It could be something narrower like knowledge of letter names, right? So the construct is just like the ability or the quality that we want it to capture in our assessment. And most abilities or qualities we can't completely capture. I can't think of one we could. Like you might say, what about speed? My running speed. Well, wouldn't we just have a race and you would time me? Well, maybe today wasn't my usual performance. Maybe I ran much faster today than usual. So am I faster than you or slower than you? It's hard to say based on one race, right? So the construct there is speed, and we're operationalizing it in terms of a 50-yard dash or whatever, but it's always going to be flawed. The way we operationalize it into what is measured and what's sort of scored, it's always going to be flawed. That's impossible to avoid. Okay, so let's take some examples of constructs. Like, for example, the DAYS, which is a maze, multiple choice, fill in the blank assessment that ostensibly addresses comprehension. It's part of the Dibbles suite of assessments. Really, the construct there isn't comprehension writ large. It's something more like low level or sentence level, surface level comprehension, and potentially some component of syntax, because you have to have the right part of speech. So that's not going to tell me whether a student can understand how an argument is constructed over a longer piece, for example. So if I am willing to accept that this is the construct that DAYS is assessing, low level, sentence level comprehension, it has pretty good construct validity, right? If I'm trying to make a claim that DAYS, the construct DAYS is capturing, is the big idea of how well readers comprehend a variety of texts for a variety of purposes, construct validity is not so great on that one. And this is a tricky construct is a tricky construct, right? So some of you expressed some apprehension or tentativeness around these ideas, and that's totally normal. You're just developing. So that's totally fine. Another example that I wanted to highlight is Janet discussed a reading checklist for an informal reading conference, and she was kind of grappling with what the construct is there. And if you look at the collection of sort of skills and strategies that are on that checklist, you could argue that the construct is reading, right? It looks at multiple facets from component skills up to like bigger strategy use and so on. So you might be able to make a claim that it has pretty good construct validity for the construct of reading. The Dibbles ORF, the oral reading fluency, and any tool that is assessing words correct per minute, if the claim they're making is that this is a fluency assessment for reading fluency, the construct validity is poor because fluency is not just words correct per minute. Fluency is accuracy and rate and prosody and parsing, which sometimes are just conflated into prosody. So if the student reads the words really fast and all correctly, they might get a really strong words correct per minute score, but their fluency, the construct we're after, would not be as strong. So don't be fooled by the word fluency in all of those assessments. Fluency, the way the Dibbles folks use it, really just means speed. Okay, so you can sort of work this backwards by thinking through how you're operationalizing the construct. So as I mentioned, if you're doing something like a running record, you could just look at words correct per minute, and then you're just looking at accuracy and rate. or self-correction rate or something like that. Or you could unpack each of those miscues and try and see into the processes students are using when they encounter unfamiliar words. And in that case, your construct is a little richer, right? It has to do with reading processes and strategies, right? There was one point of confusion where it seemed like someone thought that operationalization is how I teach the content, but it's actually how they demonstrate it to me, right? So if I say, show me your reading skills with this assessment, and the assessment is for them to read an interesting book aloud and respond to it emotionally and do a retell and compare it to another book, then that's how they're demonstrating to me their reading knowledge. That's how it's operationalized. And that's a fairly good match with the construct of reading. If I have them demonstrate their knowledge to me just by filling out multiple choice bubbles, that's not as good a match with the construct of reading. And when we think about that construct, I hope you'll really think about what you as an adult reader do when you read a complex text, a text that's challenging for you, even maybe books for this course. So there are things you do when you run into a word that you don't recognize right away, but there are also things you do in your mind and potentially in your heart and hopefully with other people to help you construct these mental representations of what's happening in the text and how that relates to what you know about in the world. And maybe you're experiencing some kind of change in your knowledge, change in your perspective. Like, these are big, complex things that are happening. And those are things that we want students to learn how to do. So our assessments need to try to reflect that. But easier said than done, but that's the goal. The confusion that McKenna and Stahl caused about construct validity is that they were saying something like, if the assessment shows that the student has strong reading skills, and they're also in the high level reading group, then it probably has good construct validity. And that's sort of unnecessarily confusing. It doesn't need to involve reading group or placement or anything like that, or even the teacher's opinion. What they're trying to say is this real thing of reading, the thing we have to do in school and in our lives, in real life, reading is the construct. And the assessment has good construct validity if it captures that. So if I'm strong in reading in all different ways in my life, and I'm taking a reading assessment, then it should show that I'm strong. And probably, as an aside, my teacher might have observed that and put me in this reading group. Maybe not, right? If I struggle with reading in my life, in my classroom, and this is an accurate construct valid assessment, it's going to capture that struggle, right? So they're trying to use the example of, the kids that you maybe find in the reading group where they're reading the lowest level texts, and that somehow that would affirm construct validity, but that kind of confuses the issue. It's just, does what the student has to do on the test and also what is actually scored, does that match the construct that the test claims to measure? And if it's something small, like phonics knowledge, then something like informal phonics inventory is probably going to capture it pretty well. It's good construct validity. If I take that test, informal phonics inventory, and I try to say, this is my measure for reading, the whole idea of all the things we do as readers, that is poor construct validity. So it's all about the match between the real life construct, how we use it in the real world, and what is really operationalized in terms of what is measured or scored or recorded on that assessment. So the construct validity of an assessment wouldn't change like as the year progresses or anything like that. It's sort of like a feature of the assessment beforehand. And it wouldn't be, construct validity wouldn't be about its match with the skills on the SBAC. The SBAC itself is aiming to have construct validity with the construct of reading. And they're trying to capture some of those more complex ideas about reading across texts and so on. But I think maybe if some of you are thinking about a comparison to SBAC, that could be that you're flipping around construct validity and content validity, because SBAC is meant to be keyed to the Common Core state standards. So that would be the content that's taught. And so something that is keyed to those standards would also have content validity. Okay, concurrent validity, I mentioned, it's not about you giving an extra test. It's about the test publisher establishing from their pilot group a comparison between scores on their new test and some older test that they're claiming kind of bolsters their argument that the test is valid and shows something important. So someone, maybe Leah, I can't remember, wrote this about concurrent validity for the DRA2. And this is right on point. According to the data provided by the publisher, this assessment has good concurrent validity when compared to other established reading tests. The DRA2 and other reading assessments were administered to students within 1 week of each other, and correlations between the results of the tests were in the 0.60 to 0.70 range. So 1.0 would be perfect, like every kid got the exact same score or comparatively the same score on those two tests. So, that's relatively strong. It's not going to be concurrent validity and reliability won't be the top scores for DRA2. But that's how it works, right? That's the publisher's responsibility. Reliability. Here's another quote from the same person that's helpful. Although the test administration guide is very scripted for teachers for the DRA2, one would assume that since it's administered by humans, there could be some variability in the results. So that is a threat to reliability. However, it appears that variability is minimal and not statistically significant. According to the publisher of the assessment, the correlation coefficients range from 0.57 and 0.65, reflecting moderate and substantial reliability. Although this reliability may be lower than on a computer-based test, it reflects good reliability for a test of this format. So that means that typically if I give the DRA2 now and then I give it not too long later, that the scores the students get will be related. They won't be identical, but they'll be related. And the reason they won't be identical is because there are other variables in play day to day, like, I don't know, who's in gastric distress or didn't get much sleep or whatever. And also because there is some subjectivity and variation in that assessment. Whereas, a strict multiple choice test that has a very constrained approach and, something a little bit more narrow, the reliability coefficient would be higher, closer to 1.0, where it would be like, I score the same today as I do tomorrow. So reliability is enhanced when you use those kind of narrow assessments like multiple choice. Dibbles has really strong reliability, especially when the people administering it are trained to do it exactly the same way every time. The subjectivity of the DRA or the EDL, the Spanish version, is a reliability threat, but it also means that the construct validity is stronger, right? Because it helps you capture more complex information. Reliability is also threatened on something like a teacher-constructed informal assessment without a score guide, like, for example, an informal reading conference form where you're just kind of taking notes. This is a great tool. Use it for sure. But you wouldn't think of it as reliable or highly reliable because one day to the next, the scoring or the notes recorded could vary. If you had something like a rubric, it would be more reliable, but you also might not get as useful of information if all you did was rely on the rubric. So It's always trade-offs. Um,